been 5 years since Hurricane Sandy tore through New York City, decimating homes and entire neighborhoods, and the hardest-hit communities have bounced back in very different ways. Many chose to rebuild. Breezy Point in Queens, where hundreds of homes were destroyed by flooding and fires, has experienced something akin to a rebirth, and dozens of homes have returned to the waterfront enclave. At nearby Rockaway Beach, the entire boardwalk has been transformed, with its old wooden pilings, many of which were torn up by the storm, replaced with a resilient concrete walkway, meant to protect nearby communities from rising tides. But in other parts of the city, post-Sandy recovery doesn't mean rebuilding. In the Staten Island community of Ocean Breeze, for example, it means managed retreat, or the practice of letting areas once populated with houses revert to their natural, non-residential states. The city has even taken the step of rezoning 3 Staten Island neighborhoods, Ocean Breeze, Oakwood Beach, and Graham Beach, as a preventative measure. The new zoning rules, adopted by the City Council this fall, prohibit dense construction and limit what may rise in those areas. Those looking to build single-family homes, for example, must obtain city planning approval before proceeding. While this may seem like a drastic measure, it's also an acknowledgement of fact. Staten Island's eastern shore is an area at great risk during floods, which will almost certainly become more frequent and devastating thanks to sea level rise. A recent study found that New York's coastal areas could be inundated with Sandy-level flooding, or worse, every 5 years. Managed retreat is intended to mitigate the effects of flooding, since the areas that have returned to nature will, in theory, absorb storm surge floods. But it remains to be seen how this will play out in communities like Ocean Breeze, and it may happen sooner than we think. So what does Ocean Breeze look like now? 5 years after Sandy, we asked photographer and camera obscura columnist Nathan Kensinger, who's been chronicling the city's changing coastline in the 5 years since Hurricane Sandy, to share his thoughts on half a decade of covering that area. He also shared photos, seen here, of the neighborhood immediately post-Sandy and what it looks like today. Revisiting Ocean Breeze every year, to consider how things have changed in the 5 years since Hurricane Sandy, has become almost like an annual pilgrimage. In the immediate aftermath of Sandy, Ocean Breeze and the neighborhoods around it were completely devastated, with homes destroyed, local residents drowned, and the survivors clearly traumatized by the storm. There were hot tubs in trees, homes pushed into the middle of the street, cars with their windows busted out by the water. In those early days after the storm, it was clear that the residents of Ocean Breeze were dedicated to returning and rebuilding their community. In the years to come, though, red tape and a slow recovery process resulted in another kind of trauma, with residents trapped in a homeless limbo. Their frustration was palpable, and resulted in most of Ocean Breeze deciding to head in a much different direction, agreeing to sell their homes to the New York state government, so that their houses could be permanently demolished as part of a managed retreat. The process of managed retreat is pretty traumatic itself. Houses, sometimes with people's belongings still inside, are ripped apart and pulverized, their foundations torn out. Watching these homes being torn down along Staten Island's East Shore is like being witness to a tragedy that is still unfolding. Usually, it was just me and the demolition crew, and the house was quickly reduced to scrap, erasing decades of memories. Twice, though, the homeowner was there, and it was an extremely emotional process for them to watch. Ocean Breeze is now slowly becoming a ghost town. A few homes remain, but you can stand in the middle of the street for an hour watching the wild turkeys wander through empty lots, without a car driving by. The neighborhood is very quiet now, and is actually a strangely peaceful place to visit, despite all the trauma that Sandy caused.